For that, we have got to talk about the FBI launching an investigation into 6 Democratic lawmakers who recently filmed that video telling U.S. troops that they can defy illegal orders.
The probe comes days after the president called the lawmakers in the video traitors, accusing them of seditious behavior punishable by death. That in a Truth Social post. Joining us now to talk about that investigation and more, Democratic Congressman Glenn Ivey of Maryland. Thanks so much for being with us. Good to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
So 4 of your Democratic colleagues are being investigated in what appears to be unprecedented, because as far as we know, there's nothing that they said that in fact is against military code or illegal.
Yeah, I think that's right. Matter of fact, it's just a plain statement of the law. And I believe it's consistent with the training that every soldier, every member of the military receives, as they're going through their process. And in a lot of other departments, Department of Justice, for example, we're instructed in the same kind of way. So it just looks like an obvious and frankly weak attempt to intimidate these members of Congress and others to try and pressure them from saying anything that's critical of the administration. But my guess is it's going to backfire. I think, this is something that people will look at and say, this is an inappropriate use of the power to investigate. And there have been so many other instances of this. The Comey and Letitia James cases are similar, I think, in some ways. And I think they'll fall flat on their face as well.
I was going to ask you about those cases because this is a president who has supporters who lament what they call the weaponization of the Justice Department under the Biden administration. But now you've got the president calling for investigations and his DOJ folks relenting to it, whether it's James Comey, Letitia James, and now these lawmakers. Is this, in your opinion, the same sort of lawfare weaponization of the DOJ that President Trump has spoken out against so vehemently in the past?
It's probably the worst I've ever seen. I don't even think the Nixon administration with John Mitchell went this far. Actually prosecuting people when it's clear that career prosecutors are telling you not to move forward with these cases because you can't prove them, I think is a level of weaponization. I tend to try and stay away from that term, but it's pretty appropriate here. That's pretty much unparalleled in American history. I think that the cases got thrown out in part because he couldn't move forward with career prosecutors. So he brought in someone, a loyalist, but she obviously had no experience in being a federal prosecutor. And I think that showed. And I think that's why the judge threw both cases out. I'm sure they'll try and, keep trying to come after Comey and James and others. But, sooner or later, they're going to have to figure out that the justice system has barriers against this kind of thing. And the inappropriate use of the Department of Justice, I think is going to blow up in their faces, and rightly so.
If we can go back to the FBI investigation of the lawmakers and what they said on that video, free speech has arguably been politicized by each party, right? But I'm kind of curious about the context of free speech in this political moment, in this example.
Well, I think free speech is free speech. If they'd really been worried about being prosecuted, they could have said this on the House floor, and then they would have been shielded by the Speech and Debates Clause from any kind of prosecution under the Constitution. But, they decided not to go that route, and I thought that was fine. And so, sure, it's a free speech piece, but beyond that, the flip side of it is really an attempt to weaponize the law enforcement apparatus at the Trump administration's behest in an effort to chill free speech. And I just think that that's something that's going to really continue to blow up in their faces. Now, the bottom line, though, is I think really most of this stuff is misdirection. He's facing real challenges with respect to figuring out what to do with health care. They allowed looks like they're allowing the health care tax credits to expire. People's premiums are going to double or triple in the near future. Folks are mad about that, and they're going to punish the Republicans for it. Same thing with rising costs with respect to food and groceries, rent, and the like. the administration said they would try and take those things on head on as soon as they got in office, but they've done everything in the opposite direction, including tariffs that have forced up food prices. So, yeah, I think sooner or later they're going to have to come back to those issues because that's the stuff the American people care the most about right now, and they're very upset about it, and they should be.
You mentioned healthcare. What is the latest on potentially extending these enhanced Obamacare subsidies? The president was on Air Force One yesterday, sort of saying both things. On one hand, he said, I don't want to extend the subsidies. But then on the other hand, he said we may have to extend the subsidies to get other things done. What are you hearing from your colleagues, perhaps on the other side of the aisle? Have they come to what the Democrats had been arguing during the course of the shutdown, this realization that something's got to get done on healthcare or premiums are going to spike?
Well, yeah, I think they're kind of struggling within their own caucus. The Republicans are fighting with each other. Many of them have been trying to get rid of Obamacare for 15 years. You may recall when they had, I think it was 65 votes to eliminate Obamacare, all of which failed. But now people like it. It's ingrained in the American culture. People rely on the fact that, for example, being pregnant is not a pre-existing condition. They like having the ability to have their kids stay on their insurance plans until they're 26. And more importantly, they're not going to like having their premiums double or triple starting in January. And so I think the Republicans recognize that they're coming up on a cliff very quickly, but they don't seem to be moving in the direction of unifying around a particular plan or proposal at this point. And there's only about 10 or 11 legislative days left in the year. But instead of focusing on those kinds of things, we had votes on, whether socialism is bad. I think that was the vote we took on Friday. Big waste of time when we've got much more important issues we should be focused on. But they took that vote, left town, and they're not coming back until next week. So it's a real failure on their part. This is an issue that they knew was coming since they got in office on January 20th. And by the way, I think we've only been in session about 20 days or so since July 25th. So they're failing to do their jobs. They've been absent without leave for big chunks of this year. They need to get to work, but I don't really see it coming together for them at this point.
It is a little interesting that Republicans are sounding a little bit like Democrats, talking about health care a lot now, coming up with their own plan and affordability.
Well, yeah, I mean, they need to figure something out. The affordability issue sort of drove the governor's races in Virginia and New Jersey in a very big way, and I thought sent a strong message there. And that's the message that the American people have been trying to give the Trump administration. Frankly, that's what the message they were trying to give to the Biden administration. And I think they're tired of not being heard. And as the prices continue to go up, I think they're going to pivot away from the election in 2024 was, for many people, they were like, I don't like everything Trump does, but I'm going to give him a chance because I think he can help us with the economy more so than Harris. But now I think they've got buyer's remorse. They see that not only has he failed to do it, but he hasn't even focused on it. And I think that from the Republican Party and their concerns on the other side is with the midterms coming up next year. I think they're worried about really being a blowout election. And so that's why they're trying to pivot and focus on these issues. But they're running out of time for this year, and they don't seem to be able to come together around a particular plan to address the issue.
All right, Congressman Glenn Ivey, we appreciate the time. As always, happy Thanksgiving to you and your family.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Same to you.